Morning, Leah and Jeff. Thank you so much for being here to talk about Seymour today.
Good morning.
Good
Happy to be
morning.
here.
Good to see you.
I appreciate you being here. You're parents of two young children, and Leah, you're a nurse practitioner who works in family practice, so you get lots of practice with this kind of thing with supporting families as well, with children who might be having some social kinds of challenges like Seymour. So I thought it would be great to have both of you as mom and dad here to talk about Seymour.
Yes. That's
I'll go ahead
good.
and I'll go ahead and share my screen, and we can go do a quick overview of the book.
That's good.
Okay, so Mindful Seymour pauses. This one is about noticing social cues. And this is something I often hear about from families, that their children are not picking up on these social cues. And I do think that that's true, that sometimes that's missed. And also, I think that when I ask kids, did you notice that? Or do you know what they said to you? Or do you know what this means? Like holding their hands up. They do know, but they're so invested in what they're doing, they're engaged, and that's just not what they're paying attention to a lot of times. They're paying attention to something else that's more engaging to them, even though they do sometimes understand that information. And sometimes they are actually ignoring it because they like what they're doing and they want to continue doing it. So it can be hard. So this is a story about Seymour and his sister, and she's acting as the mom in the story. And Seymour's just learning about all of this, and his sister needs to help him learn about social skills at social cues. And so he's really very impulsive, and he's very distractible, and so he sees these frigate birds flying overhead, and so he's pretty engaged in watching that. In fact, he's not even paying attention to what actually he's in his imagination. He's not paying any attention to actually what's going on in real life on the playground.
It's a pretty familiar setup for us, I would say. You go to a new place sometimes and feels like, I mean, I like that sister sort of sets up like, here we're at this place and here's what we do here. Here's some ideas, and then he kind of just goes off on his own tangent right away. So yeah, it's a familiar setup, I think, probably for a lot of parents, I guess.
Yeah,
Yep.
I think so. Imaginations are big. And
Mhm.
Mhm.
sort of what I said at the beginning, that's what they're paying attention to.
Mhm.
So when I go to schools to observe students in the on the playground, this is what I see. They're not paying attention to where they're going. And they do go right through the middle of a game. And other kids, of course, don't like that because it's interfering with their game. In this story, I tried to make it so that the birds were pretty nice to Seymour and just were kind and generous and forgiving, and actually teaching him in the process. And the reason I did that is because even though most kids don't like it, and most kids are not don't think to do what the birds in the story are, I am trying to model for kids that they could be like this. They could be helpful toward others, because in my experience, kids are not doing any of this on purpose. So they really do need instruction and direction and feedback from their peers so that they do learn. And when kids are just when they're not getting that feedback, they don't know. And so I
That's a really interesting point. I actually hadn't thought about the book from that perspective, but that's probably a very valuable aspect of this too, because we definitely see that. Yeah, maybe it's not too realistic the way the kids react in this, because they can be a lot more sort of mean or perceived that way. I feel like with our kids, they would maybe not be as kind as these kids. So that's a good sort of reminder and modeling for them.
Yeah.
yeah,
From
yeah.
both. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm hoping that other kids who read the story will think I could be like that, because I'm wanting the kids who are more like Seymour, having those types of challenges, to start thinking, well, I could be like Seymour. So I'm
Right.
hoping other kids will think I could be like those birds too.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean too. It's a misperception on their part that there's some negative intent of the other
Yeah.
child, when really they're just as lost as each other, right? So yeah.
Yeah, and they don't have another explanation.
Right.
So the only explanation they have for it is, then you must be doing something on purpose, because they don't know why else somebody would do those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Right.
Why would you bump into me? Right.
Yeah.
So another reason for having that kind of response in the story, to try to help kids understand that there might be a reason. And this is kind of what's going on in the story. And all these birds are bumping into him, and he's getting hit by the balls, and he gets frustrated, and he just kicks the ball away out of the game. And now everybody is really upset because they can't play the game anymore. And this again is something I see all the time. Seymour is also not understanding why all of this is happening to him, and he thinks it's mean. And so he's getting even by kicking it out of the game.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah, his emotions have run away with him at that point, and yeah, it's another familiar response we would see.
Yeah. So his sister says, well, I've got these special glasses, goggles, that kind of look into the future and help you learn something about what will happen if you uh, 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 um, can find the clues if you look through these glasses. So she's helping him see, like, oh, well, this is actually what was going on here. I didn't even know. And she's telling him to take a look here, and what are the clues that are telling you the birds actually aren't being mean. And so she's helping them see, like, oh, this bird's like, huh, well, that bird just got in the way of my great shot. I hope he's okay, instead of being mad at Seymour. And this one is saying, whoa, that bird's fast. I didn't even have time to get out of his way. I didn't mean to hurt him, because nobody's out on the playground to hurt other people, but they can misperceive, as you said, Jeff.
Mhm.
And so, of course, Seymour's not trying to do anything and disruptive to their play. And so his sister says, well, then let me show you what you could do instead. And so she's helping him know that he has to be paying attention to two things at once. And this is what's so hard for so many of the kids I'm working with, whether it's paying attention to what you're doing that's fun for you, but it's also paying attention to what other kids or birds are doing that's fun for them, and keeping that both in your mind at the same time. That's what's hard. In my social skills groups, what I often see is that kids might play a similar game, but maybe not with balls quite as hard as this, because that would be harder for them to play with, maybe a very soft ball, or even snowball, kind of pretend snowballs. And they get so into the game that they forget all the rules, or they get even with somebody because they think, oh, you hit me in the face on purpose. And
Yeah.
so none of that is accurate perception, but it's all occurring because it's really hard to think about what are the rules and what's safe. And also, what's the most important thing here? Getting that shot, or making sure everyone is having a fun time and everyone is safe? And kids know the answer to that question, but that's not always what they actually are doing.
Definitely.
It's hard.
It
So
is.
puts on the goggles, and now he's seeing the details that his sister's talking about. And his sister says, well, I have a badge that I wear that helps me remember about thinking about two things at the same time. And so would you like to wear it? And of course he wants to. And it says, pause, notice you, notice me, watch for cues. So that's the reminder. You got to think about yourself and others. So now as the game ends, all the birds are interested in his goggles, and you can see all the positive things that the other birds are saying to him. and his response too. So that mirroring neuron of if somebody's nice to you, you're going to be nice back. And so he's seeing that people are not actually mad at him. And so he's able to then say, oh, are you okay? He's realizing that he had a part in it, partly because of his sister's help, but also I think because he's seeing that they are reaching out to him and being kind. And our brains are built to respond in kind.
Yeah, this is a good version of that we talked about earlier. The modeling from both sides is really, really key.
Yeah. And so so then as a result of their communication and their understanding of others and each other's intentions, he's able to make friends with them, and they even invite him to join in the game. So everyone is assuming the best of everyone else, and that makes it fun for everyone. And then it's fun to play the games. And now he's more aware also. He's going to have to make a choice between playing with the games or watching the birds. And so I think he's going to be able to practice that a little bit more. And I think, other kids would probably, in my social skills groups, if a scenario like this happened, they would still have a hard time ignoring those birds. Like they can't ignore a spider on the ground, an ant on the ground. They can't ignore a plane flying overhead. It's really hard to ignore these external distractors and still pay attention to the game. So I think it will still be a challenge. I guess there's another book here about how to sit or do playing this game.
Yeah, I was thinking that too when we read it also. I mean, the making that choice is not always easy, and sometimes hard for them to even make a clear choice about one or the other.
Commit. Yeah. So that's that book. So now these are the extra goodies that I put in that are free gifts that people can go online and look under the books tab, and all of these free gifts that go with each of the books is available there to just download. So this is Turquesse's badge. And so this is something kids actually really like doing. When I work with them and in my sessions, they think having the badge is really, really fun. And so I actually have a blank badge also, that if they are working on another kind of skill, they can also have a badge like that. So I just make up things to say on it, but it always starts with pause because that's the cue. Slow down, think for a minute. Now, what are you supposed to be thinking about doing right now? Okay, you know what to do. Go do it.
Yeah, it's great to give them a physical artifact to have them connect with.
Yeah. Kids did see this one activity when we were going through, and I said, what is the big pink circle? And they said it's a pause button. So I don't know if that was the idea, but that's what they
I think that's great. Yeah, that's great. And then these are goggles that kids can make. And so it can be an opportunity to pretend to, put the pretend ones on, and with an adult making sure they're safe wearing them because it's like a mask.
Yeah. I know. My only disappointment here, Dan, is these weren't real future goggles.
I know. When I'm rich and famous, I can start marketing them.
Okay.
So, go through space. And how is that? Are you paying attention to what's going on around you, on the ground, up in the air, everywhere? Are you distracted by something? Are you noticing what's going on? It's just a practice. It can be around the house. It can be on the playground at school. It can be anywhere that's a safe place with the supervision of an adult to do something like this. And then this one could be, you can draw on this one. Of course, it's not for wearing, but it's how would you navigate through space? So maybe there's a challenging situation that a family experiences, and they could say, well, let's make a plan for how to do this so that we steer clear of what other people are doing. So there's another book I've written about Seymour moving through space. or sharing space with others. And that's sort of the same thing. How do you go through space? Paying attention to what others are doing as well as paying attention to yourself. There's similar books in that regard, but different messages. There's some overlap.
Yeah, that's one I thought our kids would engage with too, is the creating the scene on the goggles there and everything. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so this one is just a tracing activity, but it's showing that Seymour is avoiding all the different things going on in the playground, and he and his sister are even giving each other high fives because he's really thinking about what's going on in his actual world, not his imagination world. And he's being successful, and everyone is having fun playing because everyone's thinking about each other and about themselves. So being an occupational therapist, I had to put in some fine motor things. So the goggles and this, and then this is just a little activity where it tells first the scenario. It shows the scenario of what happens if you're not paying attention to what's going on around you. These are the consequences on the first row. And what happens in the end, like nobody likes at that ending. And then in contrast, the other scenario where he is paying attention to what's going on in his imagination while also what's going on in real life and what the consequence is of that. In the end, they all want to be friends with him because he's got a cool gadget and because he knows how to navigate space and his imagination at the same time. So sometimes playing out the scenario for kids like this helps them understand because it's very visual for them and they can remember. And I like to think that they'll remember this scenario and visually in another situation where this might come up for them.
So takeaway.
Yeah, a good way to reconnect with lesson of it.
Yeah. And so this one is one where you can do it yourself. So everybody can think about a situation that happened, like let's draw it out. And so putting that your body into something, and it could be painting it. It can be any scenario that you want. It doesn't have to be a masterpiece kind of art, just some representation of first this happened. And if you go back to the pictures, so he did this, there's a reaction from others as a result of that. Then he reacts to their reaction. And then the last scenario is, how did you like that? How did it go? And so this is the same thing, trying to teach kids that there is going to be a reaction to something that you do. And you're going to then react to what they reacted to. So how are you going to like it if you do X? How are you going to like it if you do Y? So it's an open palette there for working that through for situations that come up.
Yeah, this is a great scenario for the drawing your own masterpiece because yeah, the wrestling example here is we can relate to that one for sure with our kids.
Yep.
Yep. How could it go better? Noticing the other person and noticing yourself.
Yep. And a similar kind of thing where something happens and it escalates rather than understanding the intent. Maybe they bunked you and they didn't really mean to, but then you feel like, oh, they're trying to hurt me, so I'm going to escalate my behavior, and then spirals.
That's usually what happens. Yes. From the ways I hear. And the bottom line is, in those situations, the bottom row should have something about communication in it. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to do that, so that someone knows it was unintentional. And that is not a very quick to think of kind of response for many of the kids I work with. Words are the last option generally, and only if prompted.
Right.
And supported by an adult, like what were you trying to do? What did you want him to know? That kind of support. Then everything gets solved. But in the moment, it could be so much faster if you just say, oh, sorry, are you okay? Okay, let's keep going. Because that's all kids want to do is just keep going. They don't want to stop and talk about it. But it's really hard in the moment to think.
Yep.
So these are some tips for parents or therapists, teachers, to help them kind of understand, because we as adults can be like the birds in the story too. Like, what are you thinking? Why did you do that? I don't understand. And it can be hard to explain behaviors, but we all know that the behaviors are telling us something about what's going on underneath the behavior. And these are some things that might be going on underneath the behavior to consider, rather than to be like the have a reaction that's assuming the worst, but rather kind of an adult pausing for a minute and thinking, what could be going on here, instead of having the knee-jerk reaction that is hard to also stop and not respond in that way, and to stop and think, what could be going on? And so, did any of these stand out to you as things that are things that go on with your family?
Oh, I would say,
I mean,
yeah,
90% of the
yes,
list.
probably almost everything here. Yeah. Yeah, sensory overload is one that stands out to me, and that's one that um I think has been a bigger one than I have thought before.
Which one was it?
Sensory overload.
Oh yeah.
You know, we've started to get that feedback from our kids. Like, you know, we take them to a loud place, and they really do experience that differently than us, because they're not used to it. You know, if we go to like a baseball game or something and it's really loud and there's a lot going on, and that really does affect their behavior. And so, yeah.
Differently.
Right.
One child, she'll go in and the other child will start going out.
Right.
So it's complete opposite reactions to the sensory overload, but it's both they are the same, their reactions to sensory overload in different expressions.
Yeah. So for us, it's like having that empathy and then pausing and recognizing that, and then having two and then both going in different directions and trying to figure out what to do is always a challenge. But yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great example. And I think that kids certainly don't know how to explain that.
Yeah.
And so the reaction would be hard. What's going on? I'm not talking. What's going on? I'm bouncing off the walls. I don't know how to explain that. And it's hard to think, oh, could it be sensory overload? It's hard. And as we said multiple times in the story, misinterpreting.
Yeah.
Big one. And then just kids, so many kids are just on the edge of fight or flight or freeze response anyway. And so it's just so easy to go there. And what you just described is that one is freezing and the other is fleeing or fighting.
Yeah.
And that's also hard to imagine. And I think that what a lot of people don't understand, and certainly kids don't, and this is one of the things that I try to explain to kids, is that it's your brain telling you or protecting you. And it's just thinking there's an emergency, but it's the brainstem part of the brain, the emotional brain that's responding in that way, not the thinking part. The thinking part is offline in the moment. And so it's harder for us as adults to be able to communicate to the brain that is emotional, and because it's not hearing logic, not hearing words. And so it's really hard to be in that moment and understand. So removing them from the situation the best you can, especially if it's something like sensory overload. Okay, let's get out of the ballpark and have something. Let's get out of the noisy restaurant. Let's get out of a noisy play area, something like that. It's not just the noise, but also lights, like in some of these superstores, and sometimes the crowds can be overwhelming too, in the same way.
Sure.
Yep. But yeah, the list is very relatable.
Would you say, Leah?
The list is very relatable.
Yeah.
Being absorbed in thoughts and interests and worries, trying to avoid, making a mistake, sensory overload. I mean, clearly immaturity is part of the game.
Yeah.
And misinterpreting, definitely.
Yeah. And I was going to mention that my book, Tijuana Mañana, The Anxious Iguana, is about what I just said. Dr. Dan Siegel coined this phrase, upstairs brain and downstairs brain, and kids relate to that. And the downstairs brain just meaning the emotional part of the brain, and the upstairs brain meaning the thinking part of the brain. And so many kids think that they are quote unquote bad kids because they react this way to these kinds of situations, when that's not it at all. But again, they don't have another explanation because they're very black and white. I'm either a good kid or I'm a bad kid from their perspective. And so the point of the book was to try to help kids understand that's not accurate conclusion to draw. It's your brain doing its job. Now, how can we make a plan for solving problems like this, like other problems that I've written stories about, so that you have a plan that's step by step, you know what to do in this situation, and you've practiced it, and an adult is helping walk you through it so you can be successful. That's the point of that book, so that kids can feel encouraged. Like I can be like Tijuana Mañana in the story because I have a plan for what to do.
Right.
Sure.
And this is just some strategies to try in those situations. So I guess could have put on here, remove from the situation, but I guess sensory breaks would be something like that. There's social stories, which I put an example there at the very bottom of one. It's one that's not related to this story, but it's just an example of a social story. And there's all different versions of that. Like when I do something similar to this with kids, I don't do it on the computer like this one example is there, but just on a piece of paper, or I make a recommendation to families to try to do the same thing. But it's just a pretty helpful thing because it is just what I said. It's a plan. If this happens, this is what we do. And it's an acknowledgement that this is something that can be really hard. So now we have a plan for what to do, and it's going to make it easier. And again, that pathway starts getting built in the brain for what to do that actually leads to success and mastery of something versus continued, that didn't work, that didn't work, that didn't work, and meltdowns.
Yeah.
Anything on here besides that ring a bell to you of something relevant?
Also a lot probably here. Slowing down. I think sometimes there's action before thinking.
Expressive outlet. We've done some journaling.
There we go. Yeah.
Recently, or drawing, even if it's not about the exact topic, always it's just helpful for them to move to that mode.
It's usually not from that day. It's from a day or two or a week prior.
Yeah.
Or months prior.
Yeah.
But the expressive outlet, that works. And also with the doing the drawing of acting out the drawing page that you had about the scenario, the little takeaway. And the sensory breaks, definitely. Or just leaving early, even.
Yeah,
it's a place that we're going to.
It's a good one.
Otherwise, managing it, the playground or the school, taking breaks.
It's a lot of it's been things like that. Yeah, for us to plan for and plan to leave early and be able to. An exit route.
Yeah. Great. Yeah, I think all those ideas that you shared are really very helpful for families. And previewing, I guess that's not actually on here, but previewing is another thing that families tell me frequently, that really helps their kids know what to expect when they're entering a situation that might be challenging.
Yep.
It happened to me this morning.
Yep.
You did some previewing?
I didn't do the right previewing, and we had different ideas about how we were going to get to school, and we worked through it. But I thought we were riding, and it turns out we were walking, and had to change things on the fly. But
the kids said we were walking.
The kids
they
said,
wanted to walk.
They were walking. So All worked out.
And then this is the last one for explaining why kids might not be noticing the social cues. So, oh, that's one. Sorry, that's the same thing. So this is the last one. So the frigatebirds are on the dodgeball, fly, pause. All those words are word searches. You can find those words in this word search. And of course, I try to put in the keywords mindful and pause and cues, but also connecting. Connecting really, really matters. Throughout all the books I've written, a connection with an adult, or somebody that they feel comfortable with, just matters. Someone who takes the time, like his sister did in the story, to spend with Seymour and help him learn about things and to feel safe. Because when we're connected, if we find somebody that we're connected with, it makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah.
Things feel much more manageable.
Yeah. They have, a person to reach to.
Yeah. Yeah. So, did you have any final comments you want to make about the book or the free gifts? Otherwise,
Yeah, I think generally, I mean, we broke it down to each section there, which is helpful. And so so we can process it as the grown up for them and then can present it to them. We've read it to them twice now, and I think it sinks in each time it's read. And so they, see each clue and cue in the book. I think the activities they responded to, the ones that we showed them.
Yeah.
I definitely know our son likes to do word searches, so that'll be something he would gladly do. But yes, I think it's very relatable.
Yeah.
I think
oh, good.
the scenario that happens daily, and if not multiple times a day, and then the activities that go with it to interpret it with personal examples afterwards is very helpful, and will help any child, I think.
Well, when the whole family has common language,
And common
you
language.
have something to talk about, like, oh, that's like Seymour. Because sometimes kids might struggle with knowing what the word is, what they're feeling like, but they might say, I feel like Seymour when X happened. And when you all have done the exercise, the activities together, read the story together, you all have something in common to relate to. So it makes conversation communication easier for everyone. So that's a helpful too. Good conversation starter too. Like, did something at school happen today that made you feel like Seymour?
Sure. A good conversation starter. Definitely. We've also referred to it in the moment already.
Oh, you have.
To pause and to notice you.
Oh, good.
Yeah. Yeah.
What was the scenario, or can you remember?
Okay, let me see if I can remember it. Great question. Okay, what were we doing yesterday? What was it? I mean,
Yesterday at the pool or something, or
yeah, we were at the pool, just the pool, maybe. Oh goodness, I'm not sure if I'm gonna remember, but I think it's just mostly,
Okay.
yes, I think it was at the pool. We were at the little play structure next to the pool, and our son had like, I don't know if it was like a water squirt or something that was left there by someone else, but he had it and it was like a wand, like one of those big bubble wands,
Oh,
it
yeah,
looked like. And he wanted to move around with it. So we were there, and my daughter was there and another kid. So I said, notice you and notice them.
Oh,
Be like,
good.
pause and notice where each person is before you want to swing this thing around. You have to have enough space for yourself. So I had to pause and notice where everything was before he started,
it's exactly
moving
like
in large movements. Yeah. So it worked out.
That's a great example. Yeah. Yeah. So glad it was applicable already.
Yeah. Yeah. Because he wanted to imagine something with that, not necessarily with other people. So he needed to notice the other people to be able to move away and commence the imaginary play.
Okay. Yeah. Just like Seymour. So great thank you for sharing that example. Perfect.
Were you adding something?
No, yeah, I think you covered it all. I think the activities were an interesting one last night. I noticed they really got engaged with and interested in that. So that's something for us to follow up and do too.
Good. Well, thank you both so much for being here today to do this with me. I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing your stories.
Certainly. Of course. Thanks for
Yeah.
having us.
Thanks. Happy to.